Hey everybody, welcome to a slightly delayed episode of Blazor StateHasChanged. I think after rebooting several devices, the internet outage has finally gotten resolved. This is kind of a daily occurrence if you have Spectrum Internet, so this is a ringing endorsement for their services. Thanks for hanging around if you're still in the chat room. Looking to get started here in just a minute. So if you guys are out there, give me a ping so I can see if you're still connected or I'm still connected, just to make sure everything's up and running. Don't want to get started with, there we go. It looks like we got some folks back in the chat room. You need to send out a quick tweet to make sure folks know that the show's back up. Make sure everybody can get in and enjoy the show. So give me 1 second while we get started. Just send a quick message out to the Twitterverse here. All right, so I've got a good show today. We have some major announcements for the Blazor community. The brand new Telerik UI for Blazor is out in an early preview, so I'll be talking about that today, show you some demos of how to build some things with it. It's going to be a lot of fun. We've got a data grid component. We've got a tab strip component, so there's a couple components in there. The buttons, Telerik UI buttons are in there as well. So we'll build some things on the Razor components or server side part of Blazor, and we'll also build some things on the WebAssembly side of Blazor. So let's get started here now that it looks like the stream is back up and stable and we've got people connecting again and I'm connected again, most importantly. So let's go into some news real quick. Again, Telerik announced the Telerik UI for Blazor early preview. This is a product that we are experimenting alongside of the Blazor experiment. So we've released just a few components here, and there's an article linked below. Well, it will be linked below in the stream here in a minute, where you can view this article that talks to you a little bit about Blazor, what it is. And we also have how to get started, how to install the Telerik UI for Blazor, which we'll go through on the show, but it's nice to have it somewhere in writing as well. So it takes you through step by step on how to install it and do some quick demos. So make sure you check that out. I wanted to highlight some community examples today. We've got from Shahid, he's got a blog called Wake Up and Code. And he's frequently blogging on here about Blazor. He's got a great article about full stack web development in Blazor with ASP.NET Core. So make sure you check that out. That's a good read. I'll put all these links in my show notes and I'll publish that at the end of the show. Also, a frequent visitor of the show here goes by the name of Lupusa. He's got some really interesting demos on how to use Blazor with WebSockets, and he's already integrated the Telerik Grid on the demo for WebSockets that he has. So this is a really cool example of how to use web workers and do all of that within the confines of Blazor. So that will be in the show notes as well. It's a really slick example. He was able to turn this demo around with the Telerik UI for Blazor like immediately after we launched, which was really awesome to see. I also got another really good demo. This has a really nice looking UI. This is from Loheath. It is a converter application, one of those things where you can put in kind of any type of numeric conversion that you need done. So if you need to convert, miles to kilometers, those type of things. He's got a really great setup here where you can select the different types of conversions, and then within that there's drop downs to get your different conversion types and kind of like this calculator input on the side. What's really nice about it is it also does this nice responsive UI that looks amazing on mobile. It looks like I lost my my page there, but it looks really great on mobile. If you get a chance to pull that up and look at it on your phone, it looks phenomenal. Kind of shows off the ability for Blazor to work on mobile devices. There it is. That looks really good there. So I'm assuming it's using Bootstrap to do that. So any kind of web technologies that you want to use with Blazor are possible, and you can use things like Bootstrap 4 and Foundation and all those great things to do responsive layouts. So it's a really good example for seeing that type of thing. Again, I'll put that in the show notes as well, so you can find that really easily. So let's get into some demos, because that's what we're all here hopefully to see today. I've got some things lined up with the Telerik UI for for Blazor, brand new stuff. We just announced this on Thursday last week, and we had our webinar on Friday, and I didn't have a chance to really get in deep on demos. We've got a packed show for our Telerik webinar, because we have just so many products, and there's so many new things that we add to our DevCraft collection on a kind of quarterly basis. And there's just too much to get into really deep dive demos. So that's what we're going to do now. And I want to take you through everything from the very early parts of just getting the bits. So let's do that first. The first thing we need to do is open up our browser, and we need to go to the download page for the Telerik UI for Blazor, and that is linked here in the UI below, kind of in the middle of the screen next to the banner for the Telerik UI for Blazor. And it is it is linked in that article. We're still working on product pages and whatnot, so those things will be up soon. In the meantime, this is the method of getting to those downloads. We're going to go to, let's see if I can get this right here. This article that I showed you earlier, where it says introducing Telerik UI for Blazor. I'm going to scroll down a little bit, and bullet number 5 here, experiment with us, is where the installation part gets started. So this is a free trial for Telerik UI for Blazor. Normally our trials last 30 days, but this is an experiment for us as Blazor is being built. So the free trial doesn't have a specified end date yet. We don't know when that's going to happen, and we don't have a crystal ball to know when Blazor is going to be completed and officially available. There will be a version of it available in ASP.NET Core 3.0. But while we're building this thing, we want people to try it out and give us feedback. So it is completely free for an indefinite amount of time so far. So to get started with the early preview, you will need a Telerik account. It's a free thing that you can go sign up for. Just a few quick fields to sign up for that. Let me actually pull up that page. And let's see here. I want to open this in an incognito tab because I have a Telerik account already, and I don't want it to pre-log me in. You simply fill out this login form here. So email, password, first name, last name, the usual type of thing to create an account anywhere. This is going to be a free account, so no worries there. So just fill out this free account, click download. That's one way to get the Telerik UI for Blazor. If you already have an account, you can just hit login. It'll automatically start downloading. There is a preferred way to get this as well. Once you have your free account set up, you can add a NuGet, Telerik NuGet feed. So this is for our private NuGet repository. It requires a little bit of setup. I have a link here on prerequisites number 3. And if you click this, you'll get the documentation for setting up a NuGet source from Telerik. And it's pretty straightforward. You just need to run some command line tools and include your username and password that you used, or your email and password that you used to create your free account. And once you do that, you'll have a nice UI inside of Visual Studio to add Telerik products to your applications, and that includes Telerik UI for Blazor. That's my preferred way because if we push an update, you'll automatically get that update versus if you download the package, the NuGet package for this, and add it manually. If there's an update, you won't get the update automatically. You'll have to go back and re-download that file. So let's do a file new project and get started now that we know where to find the bits and how to download them. And for Blazor, you need to have some additional tooling installed if you don't have it already. If you go to blazor.net, just follow the instructions on blazor.net on how to get that tooling installed on your machine. And it adds the Blazor compiler and templates and things like that. So those are installed, and those are underneath of ASP.NET Core web application. So I'm going to take a look at some questions real quick that are coming in early on here. Let's see. Shushi Nutar says, "Hi Ed, if Telerik creates components for Blazor, is there an announcement by Microsoft for Blazor to leave experimental state soon?" We don't have any information about the experimental state of Blazor ending anytime soon. There's been no announcements that we know of in public or behind the scenes. So there is a version of Blazor called Razor Components that runs on the server that is officially announced that will come in ASP.NET 3.0. And that one uses SignalR versus WebAssembly. So there is, but there isn't. So the WebAssembly stuff is still in experimental state. So I can explain more as to why as we go on with the show. One of the big ones is the file size in WebAssembly is still quite large, so your applications are pretty big going over the wire. Until they figure that out, I think that experimental state will stay. Does Blazor replace JavaScript on the browser? Yes, for most intents and purposes it does. There are places where WebAssembly cannot reach yet though. For example, reading files off disk, doing direct DOM manipulation, things like that, still do require some JavaScript. So while you as a C# developer probably won't have to interact with JavaScript unless you absolutely need one of those things that I just mentioned, there are people that are building either community resources to put C# APIs in place where you don't have to go write those things yourself. So you can go out to like NuGet and get those pieces of code. So you don't have to directly touch the JavaScript yourself. There is some JavaScript running underneath the hood though. Let's not pretend that it's completely gone. For the Telerik UI for Blazor, this version of Telerik UI for Blazor does not have any JavaScript included with it. So everything you'll see in there runs natively in Blazor. And yes, thanks Janescu. Razor Components is available in ASP.NET Core 3.0, which is in preview right now. So let's get into File New Project here. We've got an ASP.NET Core web application. I'm going to call this Telerik UI Grid Basics. And I'm going to use the Razor Components version of this initially because this is likely to be the first supported version of Blazor that will be released. That is our primary target right now, although our stuff does work with WebAssembly with additional configuration. So I'm going to choose the third. So you can see I've got multiple templates up here. I've got Blazor. This is all static HTML, CSS, WebAssembly. There's also the Blazor ASP.NET Core hosted, which is similar. It's still using WebAssembly, but it's using a ASP.NET backend for web APIs and hosting the application. And then there's this third option, which is what will be called Razor Components in ASP.NET Core 3.0. Thank you for the new follower. Let's see, we've got DI Biter. It's hard to pronounce these Twitch names, but thank you for following the show. I hope you find the information that we have useful. And today we're covering Telerik UI for Blazor. and we're getting ready to start this Blazor components assembly, and we'll fire off this template. This is going to be a server-side rendered project. And most of the code that you see here will be able to work on WebAssembly as well, and we'll tinker with that as the show goes on. We'll convert over to a WebAssembly project in a bit to see what the differences are between those two project types. So this guy is spinning up. There we go. Looks like our project is created. I have installed the Telerik UI for Blazor, but it is not in my project yet. I have the option to either install it from disk or from NuGet. So what I'm going to do is show you how you would add that package if you had downloaded it. And the first thing you want to do is come into dependencies and right click and go into manage NuGet packages. And if you've downloaded the package directly and you don't want to use a NuGet feed, you still have to set up a local NuGet source. So if you go into the settings gear over here on the far right hand side where it says package sources, you can open up this dialog and click new, this plus sign up here, and then navigate to the folder where you downloaded the NuGet package. So that could be wherever you personally take your files and download them. Maybe it's in downloads, maybe you moved it somewhere in your folders on your disk. Point to that folder, select it, and then that package source will become available. I'd suggest naming it like local NuGet or something like that, so it has an intelligent name that you can find in your sources. I'm going to hit cancel because I have my Telerik NuGet feed already in here, which I just need to double check. I was experimenting with some stuff yesterday and I tried to break it on purpose. So the source name for the NuGet package feed, which requires a command line to install the feed, it is in our documentation. I showed it earlier. I'll leave some links in the show notes as well on where to find that. But the source is nuget.telerik.com/NuGet. And this is where Visual Studio will be able to find the Telerik UI for Blazor. And again, this is my preferred way to install the UI bits, because if you come in here to browse, and you can change this directly to telerik.com. I have a full DevCraft subscription, so I may need to restart after that change I just made. So let's see, NuGet and update, okay. Let me restart my Visual Studio here, make sure it's picking up my NuGet package feed changes. Sometimes it'll get a little off, especially if you've accessed it before you make those changes. It caches that URL. So let's go back into that project, and it should be working now. So we named this Telerik UI Grid Basics. So I have my Telerik NuGet feed that has all my DevCraft stuff in it, and whenever there's an update to any of our products, those things will automatically get refreshed. So that's why it's my preferred way to install the NuGet package. All right, thanks for the new subscriber. Thanks again. I noticed you just followed and now you're subscribing, so that is awesome. Appreciate this, both the follow and the subscription. So in manage NuGet packages, again, that cache should have been blown out now. And I'm still getting an error. Let's just check this real quick and see what this says. Login failed. So because I messed around with the URL, I guess it may have lost my credentials, which is fine. We will go ahead and just remove this, and I'll show you the way to get the local package. Let me open this dialog here real quick, and I've got that package downloaded. Let's see, let me cancel here. I have that package downloaded and in another project right now. So if I go into my source folder, this is where I've stashed it for now. I actually put it in the project I was working on to double check that it would work with this type of installation. It's all brand new stuff, so we're learning how people might use these things and what problems they might encounter. So I was purposely trying to break the install experience so I could help walk people through that were having trouble. So under, let's see if I have it under downloads. Not seeing it there. I'll go back and re-download that file. So this is one of the few ways to install it, and if you click, there we go. All right, the file is downloading. So I've chosen to do the download method because to add that NuGet feed, I have to manually type in credentials, which I don't want to do live here on a broadcast. So I'm going to go ahead and just download this file, and I'm going to paste it into another directory where I can find it. So we'll go into my source folder. Let's see, repos. And I'm just going to put it right here in this main directory. So Telerik UI for Blazor NuGet package. And then I just need to do the same thing up in this window here. I've got this local Telerik NuGet package feed here, and I just dashed it right under repos. If I hit OK, now it should light up when I choose local NuGet. And there's Telerik UI for Blazor. I have some other things that I've stashed in there as well. This is the one that we want. So I'm going to install this. So that would be the steps if you're downloading. If you use the command line tool, it will pop a package source directly to telerik.com, and you'll see all of your products in here, and it will update automatically. So you'll see multiple versions when we release new versions of this. So now we have the dependencies installed. Lohi, thanks for joining, man. Talked about one of your projects just a little bit earlier. It's nice to see you back. Remember, if you guys have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat room. That's what I'm here for today, is to help answer questions. They can be directly related to what we're doing or Blazor in general. I'd be happy to answer those questions. So what we've done so far is added the NuGet package Telerik UI for Blazor. Next thing we need to do is wire up and tell the Blazor application where to find those DLLs. So we're going to go into View Imports. This is where we're going to import our settings for, or register our dependencies. Let's see here. Visual Studio can hang a little bit while I'm live streaming. It's been known to do that. All right. So View Imports, and we need to come in here and add the Telerik UI for Blazor to our add some using statements in here. So I'm going to say using Kendo Blazor, and then the tag helper. This is something that is currently required, this add tag helper. I've heard this is going to go away in future versions of Blazor. No, this isn't Visual Studio 2019 right now. Blazor doesn't seem to work in Visual Studio 2019 yet. Service Pack 2 just came out yesterday, and from what I heard, when when ASP.NET Core 3 Preview 2 ships, it will begin to support Blazor. So right now I'm still in Visual Studio 2017, which is prerequisite for working with Blazor. So I've added a using statement for Kendo Blazor and a tag helper for Kendo Blazor. So those are going to allow me to access the components within my code. Next, I need to add the CSS for these components. So they are still using web technologies. So any component that you see is going to use HTML and CSS and some C#. So That's what we need to add next, is the HTML or the CSS portion of this. So I'm going to come into the root of my project, and I'm going to click on Manage Client Libraries. So Manage Client Libraries is going to drop a file in my project called libman.json. And this is my preferred way to get the CSS for Telerik UI for Blazor. And I'm going to go ahead and just paste this in. I copied it off screen here because this is a nice, quick, and easy way to do this. These packages are available from a package source called onPackage. And what libman does, this is a feature of Visual Studio 2017 and ASP.NET Core or ASP.NET, I can't remember which version. Libman was added, and libman allows you to pull package sources similar to the way that NPM does it, Node Package Manager, but it does it without pulling all the files that are in an NPM package. Another way to look at this, if you go to, there's two different dialogues here. If you click on Manage Client-Side Libraries, you just drop the libman.json file. If you come in here and do Add, under the Add dialog, and do Client-Side Library, you actually get a little UI that pops up. So in this UI that comes up, if you want to see how these JSON files are created, for one thing, the JSON files have IntelliSense, but you can also use this little UI thing here, and our package is under @progress, which is our company name, the company that produces the Telerik brand of products. And then you can see there are 3 themes under here: Kendo, Theme, Default, Material, Bootstrap. If you choose any of these, and then you need to add the version. So we need to say at version 3.0.0. It looks like we might have dropped a new version. Then you can come in and choose the files that you want. So under Files here, I'm going to choose All CSS, and that's how this this JSON file gets created. When I click OK, it creates one of these entries. So I've added all 3 Kendo UI themes to my Telerik UI for Blazor project. So now I can go in my index page. So in Blazor, there's an index HTML page. This is the root entry point for your application. And let's see. Looks like we got a little Q&A going on here. Yeah, so it is in C# and it's a SPA or single page application framework. And you can write some pretty decent applications and not use a single line of JavaScript. Let's see, we're getting questions about the where can you find the preview. I'll post that in the chat room, and I'll post it in the chat room, but it's also right below the center of the screen. So if you're looking at the live stream, just under my window, there is a link, a URL, that if you want to copy that, that's one way to find it. And I'll also post this. Oh, somebody already beat me to it, it looks like. Thank you, Lohith, for dropping the link there in chat. So I was in libman.json, and I dropped these references to our static dependencies, our CSS, and that automatically goes out and pulls in the CSS files into our project. And I've installed Kendo, Bootstrap, Default, and Material themes. So under each one of these folders, you'll find a distribution folder with all.css. This is the all CSS means is this supports all Kendo UI components. So if we when we add things like calendars and other components, the CSS will be in this all CSS. What's really cool is I can grab this all CSS and just drag it and drop it into my index HTML, and it'll automatically create the link for me. And that's one way to install it. We also have CDNs for this. I like to have them all on disk so I can swap between them very easily. But you're welcome to use our CDNs as well. So those are available. So I'm going to save that. That is, I believe, the last setup step for adding the product to our application. So it's actually just 3 simple steps. We need to first add the NuGet package, then go to View Imports and add a using statement and add tag helpers. And then finally, we just need to reference the CSS files in our index.html page. And notice there is no JavaScript being added at this time. So we don't have any JavaScript currently in any of our components we've implemented. So everything you see today is C# only. So it's pretty impressive stuff so far. All right, so let's actually write some code and do something with this new Telerik UI library. So this is a data grid, so we need some data first, right? We need something to bind to in the application to make use of our grid. So let's set up some, let's set up a class. So I'm going to come into, sorry, I'm in my index.cs.html page. In Blazor, pages are components, components are created or turned into pages rather when they have a route. So by this having a route of the root of the application, that means that this is a component that is also a page, and it follows the methodology of Razor pages pretty closely. So we can use things like @functions, which you'll see quite often in Blazor. And in here, it's this functions area. It is a place where we can add C# code to our component. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to declare a class. Normally, we wouldn't declare a class directly in a component like this, but I'm trying to keep this as simple as possible. We could easily move this to a separate file. For now, I'm just going to drop it in here, just so we can see it all on one single page. So I've got my order view model here. Order view model is going to have an ID, a decimal of freight, a date of order date, a ship name, and city. These are just properties on an object. So it's a simple object. This could be in its own class file, but I want to be able to see it as we do this demo so we can have reference to what exactly that class is. We can move it out in a little bit. The next thing I want to do is just generate some data. So I need a placeholder to hold some data. So I'm going to create a property. And this property is directly on my component, and it's going to be a list of order view model, and I'm going to call that data. So this is just a normal property. Notice this is all C#. This is not JavaScript in any way. The next thing I want to do is on my initialize method, I want to generate some data. Just going to new up some sample data, nothing really detailed. It's just going to fill in this order view model for us. So this little bit here, this enumerable range function, this is a C# function that just generates a sequence of numbers with a specified range. So I'm just going to generate records from 0 to 50. So it's going to give me 50 instances of a order view model. And I'm just going to use a select statement to fill in and populate the data. So I'm just kind of like mapping here. This is just random, data that I'm generating. Normally we'd go to a database, and we'll get there, but I wanted to start with something simple. So we're just generating static data. Now we have something that we can bind to. So now when my component initializes, I have data. I can take and use this list of order view model in my component. So now we need to add some markup. And this is where the Telerik UI grid comes in. We used the Kendo UI namespace because it does share some DNA with Kendo UI. And this is you'll notice IntelliSense isn't working. Sometimes it does this in Razor. This is a little bug in the Razor engine or something. Sometimes the very first tag doesn't get recognized. One way to get out of that issue where it's not giving you IntelliSense is to just save the file, close it, and then reopen it. And there you can see my div got highlighted with proper highlighting. And now I should be able to add my grid here. There's IntelliSense. So Kendo Grid is the component that I want to use. And I need to add some data here. So I have a data property. And I need to tell the grid where to get the data from. I also named the variable or the property that I want to get the data from data. This could be named anything. If I do a control RR here, I could say this is my orders. So I could change this to orders if that makes it a little bit easier to see the difference between the property that I'm binding to and the data that I'm binding to. So this list of order view model is now called orders. So up here I can just say at orders. Notice I took off the quotation marks. You actually do not need quotation marks in Blazor. So when I bind to that property, I can just say data at orders, and that is going to connect my data grid with the list of order view model. The data needs to be some type of IEnumerable or iQueryable data source. So the list of implements an IEnumerable, so we can use it there. The next thing I need to do is add some columns because I have order ID, freight, order date, and so on. I'll show you a little handy trick here in Visual Studio. I'm just going to create some space. And since it's going to be a lot of similar code, I'm just going to create a couple lines here by holding Alt. So if I hold my Alt key and just swipe down with the mouse, losing some stuff on my desk here, bear with me. Now I can just type several lines at once. And I can say Kendo Grid column, and then we have to give it a field. And again, this is going to be something I'm going to use C# for. I could just put in a string here and type in the name of the field, or I could use C# and I could say name of. And name of is a handy operator. Looks like my cursor's got out of sync here. Never seen that happen before, but when you're on a live stream, that's the kind of things you have to deal with. So name of is a nice handy operator that turns the name of a object and or property into a string. So I can say order view model is going to be the type that I'm going to use, and I'll go ahead and close off this tag. Now that I've got this, I can come in with IntelliSense, which is nicer than a string, because if I refactor, these things get refactored as well. And I can say order ID, and then I can say, what is my next one here? Freight. I also have order date and ship city and ship name. I see some questions coming up here. I'm just going to double check those real quick. Can we please work on a drawer component? Yeah, I think I know what you mean, like an off-canvas menu or a slide out, kind of like we have here in Visual Studio, where you can click on Team Explorer, it kind of flies out like a flyout menu. There's also, I think you're probably referring to an experience you might have had in your app, Lohith, where you have one of those. It must have been difficult to implement or something. So I'm sure you're speaking from experience there. Yeah, that would be something I'd like to see. We have one in all of our other component libraries. It's called the responsive panel. That's one of my favorite UI components. So yeah, I think that's something that will be on our radar for the near term. So we haven't even really seen this render yet. We should have everything we need here now to go ahead and render a Kendo grid. Remember, all of this stuff that I added down here is pretty much just boilerplate to get the basics of an application up and running. This is not stuff that is required to make the grid work. So I'm going to collapse all this. Everything required to get the grid working is here, where I specified my component, and this right here. I needed this property of orders to bind to. Now I should be able to go ahead and run this application. And I did this right on the index page, so as soon as it loads up, we should see a Kendo UI grid on that page. So it's the first time it's spinning up, so it's going to take just a second, do the first compilation and whatnot. Once it's up and running, it's pretty fast. Notice I used debugging mode. This is one of the benefits of running the server-side version of Blazor, is it has full debugging, where the WebAssembly version of Blazor does not have any debugging whatsoever. You can set breakpoints in Chrome, but that is all they do, is they break, and they don't even show you any meaningful values or information. So it's somewhat disappointing, but you know, it is a very beta build of Blazor still, so these things are expected. That's actually not a Blazor thing, but a mono runtime for WebAssembly problem. So remember, we generated 50 records. Here is all 50 of those records. Okay, so we've got a nice neat grid that they're all being displayed in. We didn't have to write any HTML table markup or anything. The grid is doing it all for us. Right now, we don't have anything like sorting here, so I can click on these headers, but it doesn't sort the data in any way. Also notice I can scroll all of the records like this, but there's no paging. So let's go ahead and enable some features on the grid. It's really simple to do. And come up to the Kendo UI grid and say pageable is true. And I can say sortable is true. And now I've got paging and sorting enabled. I'm going to save this, and I'll recompile and rerun the application. And when it comes up, you'll notice that I can now sort the grid, and we'll have a nice pager experience at the bottom. So these are things that are built in, and nothing that I've showed so far has any sort of JavaScript involved. So now, where we used to scroll and have 50 records, now we only have 10. And that's because we have this nice pager at the bottom. So we have paging. And you can see it's even keeping count here in the bottom right-hand corner. We're on 31 through 40 of 50 items. So that is all built into the grid. Any reason I skipped the question marks? All right, the quotation marks. They're just not required. You can put quotation marks up here and set the values like that. I find it looks a little cleaner if you don't, and it's a little easier to spot things that are not C# code. So I may have something in here that is not C#. Or for example, when I showed this name of operator, I can also come in here and specify a string directly. So I might have something like this, order ID. And this helps me see the difference between this is just a static string, where this is C# code that is doing something. It's just a matter of preference at this point. There's no design guidelines or anything like that out for Blazor yet, but it is possible to do one or the other. For me, it's easier to tell which ones are static and which ones are not. So let's go ahead and set that one back. I'll show you the reason I use this here. If I were to come in and change order ID, I'm going to hit Control RR, and I'm going to change this from order ID to just ID. Notice that this changed up here. So by using the name of operator, I get that refactoring. I'm going to go ahead and undo that. If I were to have a static string here and just say order ID, when I hit Control RR to refactor here, notice that's not highlighted. It wouldn't be refactored, and then the view would fail to load. So I like to use C# whenever possible and use strongly typed names whenever possible. Yeah, never have magic strings is a great mantra to follow. So we've got our Kendo grid. We added, oh, I didn't show sorting. So let's go ahead, let's move page up a little bit, and then let's sort. And notice that the paging still works, and we've sorted by order ID. So everything keeps in sync, and the sorting and paging in this is very intelligent, and we can sort in either direction if we'd like to. And that's just all enabled by setting that value to true. So let's do something a little more interesting with the grid. We still have some features we haven't quite explored yet. One thing is we've got an order date here, and the order date is not a very friendly looking date. This isn't something that is your normal date format. They all just say 12 a.m. So we could format that date. So let's go into the date field. I'm going to back this down to open up a full tag here. So instead of a self-closing tag, I'm opening up this tag. This is the current syntax to do this. I'm going to specify a template. Let's see, how big is Kendo Grid DLL? So right now I'm using the server-side rendering version of Blazor. So let's see here. I'll show the payload in a minute, but the DLL actually isn't sent over the wire in the scenario I'm using. So it is on the server. Let's see. I may be able to answer that question here. Let's see here. Let me do View and File Explorer. Bin debug. Kendo Blazor is 70K, so that's not too bad. What does get bad is so the application itself isn't too much of a payload. It is all of the .NET stuff that gets sent over the wire. Like the supporting .NET framework itself is pretty large. There is a option. I'll show that here, and I'll go back over this in more detail in a little bit. But if I go into, I may have to stop the project to see this, but we can do that. If I go into my solution and look at, sorry, the project level, and look at the CS proj file, I have this Blazor linker on build false. This is a server-side rendered app, so it doesn't need the linker. What the linker does is it walks through your code and it looks for dead code, and it removes it before it sends DLLs across the wire. If you turn this off on a WebAssembly application, like it's turned off here, it will send all of .NET down the wire. Ends up being about 6 to 7 megs. Okay, so it's pretty big without the linker enabled. The linker does need some work. There's currently some issues with certain assemblies not working with the linker enabled. We'll get into that later, but just kind of give you a heads up, if that linker is disabled, you've got about 6 megs across the pipe. With it enabled, Hello World app is almost 2 megs. So that is one of the biggest issues with Blazor right now, but it's something that they're very aware of. So we were getting ready to add a template here to make the dates. Application's not running anymore, but the date column, we're going to format that date column. So inside of here, I can just open up another bit of C# code. Oh, sorry, I need to specify my template tag first. And IntelliSense likes to drop the capital T on template for some reason, and that will actually break things. So be aware of that. So we need to open up a template tag. And inside of our template tag, we can specify our C# code to work with the data that's coming out of the grid. So we need to open up some parentheses here, and our code to format that date will go inside. So we are on our order date column. So we're going to format that date. So inside of this template, the grid is going to pass us an object. Currently, there's no way for us to know what type of object it is. The type that we are specifying in the parent of the grid doesn't have a way to trickle down to child components yet. So it's a little bit of a framework limitation. So instead, we're just getting the entire object and we don't know the type. So it's going to come across as context. Context is the item that is coming down from the grid. And we need to cast it. So we're going to say as order view model. So now we know what the type is. So our context is the item that the grid iterated over, and we're casting that to an order view model. Now that we have that, we can do whatever we want with it. And I can say, I want the date, and I can format this date however I want. There's quite a few ways to format this. One of them is to use string interpolation. So I can just do some string interpolation here, and I can say give me the order date, and I'm trying to remember exactly how to do this. We open braces here, and that should give us the order date, and then we can say I want to cast that to a simple date. And let's try to rerun that. Let's see if my code is right. Just trying to do that off the top of my head. I think I got it right. We should have dropped the hour off of the date by doing that. So I used one of the built-in C# date formats to do that. That string interpolation I used, the $ open parens here, is basically the same thing as saying string.format and then passing in the string with the format of, I think it's something like 0D, something like that. It's similar code to that. So using string.format is basically what I've done there. So now we have the ability to, and I broke it by pseudocoding all over the place. Let's put that back to normal. So that gives us the ability to do some templates. That was a really basic example. So let's do something. Let's do something a little more advanced. Let's add a button inside of the grid. So we've got the date formatted. We're able to sort and filter and page, or sorry, no filtering, sorting and paging. Let's go ahead and add a button in here. So we can do the same thing as before. Thank you for the compliments, by the way. So I can come in and I'm going to open up this grid tag again, or grid column tag, change it from a self-closing to an open one. And inside of this, we're going to say template again. And again, I'm not sure why IntelliSense likes to change the capitalization of this, but be aware of it. It will not render if it's lowercase template. So we've got a template tag again. Now, last time I used this quick razor feature where you can just open a set of parentheses and write one line statement that's going to return a string. If I want to do something a little more complex, I can use the @ symbol and open up some curly braces, and we can do something different in here. I'm just going to borrow this code that says context order view model, and I'm going to create a reference inside of this template, and I'm going to say, let me see if I can use var here, and I want to say item equals context as order view model. So this is going to set up a local variable for here, local within this scope. So just within this template, I have a variable named item, and that's going to be the item that the row has iterated over. Can I please zoom in a little? Let's see. Let's do. Oh, yeah. I somehow zoomed out to 90%, and then let's go ahead and bump the font size up. I know sometimes these fonts can be a little hard to see on a live stream. Let's go ahead and bump that up to 16. There we go. Hopefully that helps out a lot. Thanks for pointing that out in the chat room. I want everybody to be able to see the code that I'm writing. So I've got my grid column, I've got my template, and I've opened curly braces to give me a little more coding surface here. I can write any code I want. Now I have instead of just a string, I have this ability to write some robust code in here, and I've captured the item that is being bound to that row. So inside of this, I want to use another component. So I can embed components within the grid columns. So I'm going to say kendo button. And I'm getting some IntelliSense now, which is great. And I want to say, let's close the button off here and give it a name. I'm going to say delete is going to be the text that's displayed on that button. So I'm going to have a delete button, and I'm going to set up an event handler. So I'm going to go in here and say on button click, and notice it gives me an event handler that I can bind to. So I need to have something to some sort of function to run when you click the button. So in my functions area, I'm going to say, I'm going to have a void function called handle delete. And handle delete will take an argument of order view model, and we'll call that item. And then when we get that item, we want to remove it from our stack. So we can say orders remove, and then pass in the item. Now, once this delete function happens, we need to signal to Blazor that we've done something with the state of the UI. So we need to call StateHasChanged. And that will tell Blazor that this component, this index component, has received a UI update and it needs to refresh the component itself. So that's what that is going to do. Now up here, I can put an event handler in, and I can say @ to make sure I'm binding to code and not just a string. I can say handle delete. And this is not quite going to work yet because there's no method that matches on button click that has the signature that accepts an order item, because it's a little bit custom. But this is actually really easy to implement. We're just going to wrap this in some parentheses. And now we can say when the button is clicked, I'm going to create an anonymous function that then invokes the handle delete method and passes in the item, the current item on that row. Okay, so now we have a delete button. If we click it, it's going to invoke handle delete, passing in the item from the context. And then that will in turn remove that item from the collection and update our grid. So now if I save this and rerun it, we should actually be able to go in and delete. We can go in and delete records. I'm not sure if that was a question or a statement, or you can use parameters, but this, you can see now we've got our delete button here. I'll show you how to color this to make it stand out a little bit more here in a sec. Let's delete an item, and notice that was 0. Let's go in the middle here. Let's delete number 40. That's all the code that was necessary to make that delete work. So that's pretty simple to implement a delete like that. We're deleting from a static set of data right now. If this was your database, which we can hook this up if we have time. I have about an hour left here. This would be something like DB context here dot orders dot whatever to remove that, and then you would call DB context save changes, I believe is the entity framework way to do that. So we could do that on a database as well. Since we're on the server side, we have direct access to a database if we have one. We don't have to write, we don't have to serialize, deserialize, worry about things going over the wire, and have these abstractions in between the database and the UI. Let's see here, got some more chatter here in the chat room. I answered my own question. Those are always good. Sometimes just saying a question out loud will give you the answer you need. Let's see. Components can have component parameters. Yes. So this was a little bit different than handling a component parameter. This is just utilizing an already existing parameter. Usually they have, like if I did another type of button in here, this is the kendo button. There's other types. If you just use a standard HTML button, the onClick, let's see, onClick event will actually show you the signature, and it will be a delegate value of and it says it right here, Microsoft ASP.NET Core Blazor UI mouse event args. So by default, if I did an onClick event here, and this should throw an error. So you can see this is what I was kind of alluding to. It's going to try to pass in an event arg of a UI click event arg, and we're setting it up as an item, so that won't work. So you just use that nice little anonymous function, and you could pass, if you had event args, you could just say args, and then you could also pass both of those items in like this, if you wanted to take advantage of both of those items. This is server side, so no mono is being used in here. Everything that I've showed in this example would work in mono though, or WebAssembly. What wouldn't work is if I have DB context involved. That is where things start to fork a little bit. Also, I put this div in here initially just to show that IntelliSense wasn't working correctly. I don't really need that around my grid. I can go ahead and pull that out. So we have our delete item. It removes an item. Let's go ahead and attach. Actually, let's do file new project here. Let's start another project, and I'll show where we can use the same code on the WebAssembly side of things. So I'm going to go ahead and do file new project. I got to stop this guy from running. So we're no longer running and debugging. I'm going to open a new instance of Visual Studio, so we want to come back and reference this code just to make things easy. So we'll switch over to WebAssembly now. We've been running on Razor components, or the version of Blazor that uses Signal R. Now we're going to go use WebAssembly. So let's go File, New Project. ASP.NET Core Web Application. We'll call this one Telerik UI WASM. And then I'm going to go OK. Creating a new project. I'm going to choose the second one. The first one is nice. The second one includes a simple example of a of a web API. So that's why I'm picking the second one, because it has that web API that we can tap into, which makes for a better example than just using static files. So I'll use the second one here. Yeah, so unfortunately they decided to, oh, so you're talking about the Kendo Grid. I thought you were talking about Blazor and Razor components. Why Kendo Grid and why not Grid? For one thing, namespacing. It's not just branding, but namespacing. So if we say, if we just said grid, then if there was, say, a Bootstrap grid and it was named grid, and then also grid has kind of a different meaning across different things. So a grid could also be a layout type of a thing. We just didn't want to conflict with namespaces. It does help with the branding part, I guess. And we chose Kendo over Telerik because it does use some of the DNA from Kendo's libraries. So while it's not using any JavaScript currently from Kendo, like we're not wrapping anything, there's no jQuery, anything like that. We have about the same HTML involved, and we also use the exact same CSS. So you're going to add a Kendo whatever.css to your project. So that kind of gives it some continuity there. So we've got a brand new WASM project. I'm going to go into dependencies again, add a manage NuGet packages and add my package. And I did this early on. If you're just joining the show now, I have a local NuGet repository that has my Telerik UI for Blazor in it. I just downloaded that. I added a directory here. So you can see the path right here. Local Telerik NuGet is at c:users, my name, source repos. So that's where you would add a manually downloaded NuGet package. I also have a Telerik NuGet feed, which I broke by playing around with the UI or this tool here, this wizard too much. I broke it, so it's not working right now. I'm not going to go through the effort to fix it on the live stream, but you can get it either way. I'm going to go ahead and install here, Telerik UI for Blazor. This is all the .NET code that I need for my components. And the next thing I need to do is register the DLLs in my project by coming into the view imports, the root view imports. So it's just a NuGet package. Yes, you do need to sign up to get it. To download the NuGet package, you need to create an account. The link for that sign up page is right here somewhere below my Visual Studio window in the center of the page, center of the stream. You can find that link there. You do have to sign up for a free trial. It is free for a time frame that we haven't set yet. It will at someday become a commercial product. For now, it's free as we build it. We want people to experience it, play with it, give us feedback on it, show us what they built with it. It's really easy to get, though. The account's free. Yeah, thank you for sharing the link again. You can find it there, and it's just a simple form to fill out. What's nice is we do capture an email address, so when there's updates for the product, we can just simply shoot you an email, let you know what we've added to it, and that should also open up some opportunities to let you know where our feedback portal is, which we're just bringing online, I think today. That just came on, so it's there's advantages to going ahead and signing up for it. And it will show up in your Telerik NuGet feed if you have it set up and automatically update, which is nice. So I've opened up my view imports, and I need to add a reference to a using statement to Kendo Blazor and an add tag helper to Kendo Blazor as well. I mentioned before, add tag helper is supposed to go away in future versions. We shall see. I can save that, and I don't need to open that again. And then I need to add my CSS reference. So Visual Studio is giving me some fits. There we are. Okay, so under www-root, I want to place CSS files for my Kendo components. So I'm going to use something called libman. And if you were on the stream earlier, you've probably seen me do this already. I'm going to right-click at the root of my client project, and I'm going to say Manage Client-Side Libraries, and I'm just going to paste in this piece of code here. I will put a link to this in our show notes. It will eventually be added to our documentation. There's also in the early preview blog post, we also outline the CDN. You can also use the CDN. I'm going to go ahead and copy that, and I'll show you the difference between those two things. So I've added this libman file. Libman is a front-end library manager for .NET, and just by adding that file and putting in the JSON code that's in there, it's dropped 3 different style sheets in my application to choose from. So I have Kendo Bootstrap, default, Material. I used Material on the other demo. Let's go ahead and use Bootstrap. This will help us tell the two apart and show you that there's different themes that we can use. So in my www-root, I want to go to index CSHTML, and I can choose to either use a CDN here. So I'm pasting the CDN. It'd be something like this. It'd say kendo cdn.telerik.com, the version number, and then whatever style sheet we want to link to. I've gone ahead and just added them directly to my project so I can choose between them easily. And I've got Kendo, Bootstrap, all CSS. You can use Sass as well, which is amazing. I love Sass. You can also go to themebuilder.telerik.com and you can customize these themes. Essentially, you could use any of the theme builders. Right now we don't have UI for Blazor listed, but it's the same CSS code that's in ASP.NET Core. You could say start a theme, and then you could customize your theme with CSS or Sass by going into the theme builder and just dragging these color pickers and things like that. You'll notice this will live update. There it goes. Live update all the colors for the UI, and then you can just download the settings or the CSS for that theme. So that is compatible with UI for Blazor right now. So that's why I like to put the CSS files in my project, because I'm usually going to customize them anyway. So that allows me to do it easily there. So I've got the Kendo Bootstrap theme on this one. So we're going to match the Bootstrap 4 theme. So yeah, very specifically, this is Bootstrap 4, not 3. So we've got our CSS files added. Notice we didn't add any JavaScript. So currently there's no JavaScript that is needed to make this work. And now I can just start coding. I'm going to go into my root index page. It's my index CSHTML. And I'm going to copy the code that I used from the SignalR, Razor components, server-side Blazor, whatever terminology you want to use. I'm going to copy and paste that code directly in to my project. And again, if you saw me write this code earlier, I have a class defined right here. I did it all, like normally you wouldn't do this, but I did it so it was easily portable and I could copy and paste it like that, and we could see all of the code that is involved in this view. But normally, most of these things would be outside of your component. But you know, we're not talking about best practices per se. We're just trying to show the abilities of the data grid. So I'm going to copy and paste that code. This should be identical to the server-side operation. I'm going to go ahead and run it. I believe this will actually fail, and I'll explain why here in just a second. So let's go ahead and build it up. I did run without debugging because with WebAssembly Blazor, there is no debugging. So might as well not burn up the extra CPU cycles by enabling debugging, because it just doesn't do anything anyway. It does eat CPU process though, for some reason. All right, so it's spinning up off screen here. Let me pull it over. It's going to say loading. You're going to notice it will fail. There is a very specific reason for this. Let's see if I get... I do get an error here. And yeah, this missing method exception, if you ever see system.missing method exception, if you can't read this, I will post it in chat. This is very important. System missing method exception. This is due to the linker that runs in Blazor. The linker says, all right, we have this project that is going to go over the wire. Let's pull out all of the code that's not being used to make the DLL smaller. The problem is it's pulling out things that we need right now. I don't know if this is so much a bug or just a lack of features, whatnot of the linker, but this happens with our product right now. We're looking for easy solutions to fix this while they work on the linker. It's a known issue. It's something that just comes with the territory of bleeding edge software. This is something that's being worked on. I'm going to come into my my project that is running server side, and you'll see in the CS proj file, this is the Telerik Grid basics app that I just wrote earlier. In the CS proj file, there is this entry, and this is from the template. I didn't add this. It says the linker is not beneficial for server-side execution. Re-enable this if you switch to WebAssembly. We're actually going to not heed their advice and take this and put this in our WebAssembly project. And I will explain why we're doing this. I'm going to go into my CS proj, edit CS proj, and up here I'm going to paste that in. I'm turning this off, okay? What this linker does is it removes dead code, and it's a little aggressive right now, and it's removing things that I actually do need, so code that's not quite dead. And by turning it back on, I'm going to inflate the file size of my application pretty dramatically. So right now, going over the wire, I don't know if I can see it here because I had that error. I don't know if it fully loaded. When a Blazor WebAssembly application fully loads, I think the smallest size that is achievable right now is 2 megabytes. I know that sounds like a lot. It is a lot. That's the downside to Blazor on WebAssembly at this time. So by adding this link on build false to my WebAssembly project, I am knowingly turning off something that is supposed to bring down the file size. And now it should run. I may need to rebuild actually because the linker has stripped some things out. So let me make sure I'm in the right project. I actually need to do a clean to get the project back to a state where the linker hasn't taken things away. And now I can control F5 to do a rebuild and run. It's going to take a second. You can actually see the output is quite different. If the linker is enabled, you'll see this just run on for a bit as the linker goes through and removes pieces of the assembly that it feels that you don't need. So, same code that I used on the server side. I'm using a different theme. I used the Bootstrap theme this time, but you can see I still have my delete button. I'm still paging, and I still have sorting, and I still have the ability to delete records. So this is all using the same exact code. It was portable from one project to the next. This is the WebAssembly page, the component. So again, it's the same Kendo grid, the same templates. I'm using a list of order view model here, so it's not connecting to any DB context or anything like that. So there's nothing between these two projects that is conceptually like server-based or client-based. This is all code that's compatible across both platforms. And I was able to just copy and paste it to make that work. To show you the effects that removing the linker had, I'm going to refresh this page. This is the client side version of this application. You can see all the DLLs coming across the wire. So I've got Telerik UI, WebAssembly client, that's the actual application code, Kendo Blazor DLL, and so on. 38 requests total, and I know the summary is in here somewhere. It says 15.8K transferred. Let me do a empty cache and reload. This actually will bump up to probably 6 meg. 6.5 megs. 6.5 megs. That is quite a bit. But again, this is a beta thing. Like this is why Blazor is experimental right now. So I'll show you why we recommend the server-side operation right now. And this is part of the reason, or the biggest reason. If I go back into my server-side project and run it, and again, I kept, 6.5 megs is everything, the entire app. So all of the DLLs that were shipped across the wire end up coming out to 6.5. That's not the Telerik portion of it. Ours is like 70K of that. But if we go back, let's open up Visual Studio Code. Get this off my screen. If I go back to this, we can sort by size here, and I'll do a reverse sort. MS Core lib, which is fully getting pulled across the wire. This is one of the things that gets the linker goes through and deletes a lot from. 1.5 megabytes on its own. Okay. System.xml, mono.wasm is pretty big. There's probably some overlap in some of these things too. System.dll, you can see where this really adds up. It's in the core.net DLLs. And then from there, this all of the CSS is the next largest thing. So anything kind of below this is pretty much a moot point. It's all just small little transfers. These are like 100K or less type of things. So the big ones are MS Core lib and system.dll and system.data, things like that that get shipped across the wire that are pretty massive. So I've got that one. That was 6.5 meg. This is going to be, I lost a window here somewhere. Let's see if I can find it. There we go. This is the server side version. If I do inspect on this, I'm going to do a reload. Let me move this so it matches the other screen and look at my network. The total transfer on this one is 236 kilobytes. So running server side is a lot more efficient than running on WebAssembly for now. This could change in the near term. They are working on it. I know they're working on it. I don't know what the progress is though that they've made. SSD, what is SSD? I'm not sure. I follow that acronym. So get all the same functionality. The only real difference right now is a little bit of latency and the fact that every time I interact with the DOM, it's using WebSockets. If I lose connection, I lose my app. Yeah, SSR I got, oh, okay, it's typo. All right. But it's a SPA app, so it's okay if it's bigger. Compare it with an iOS app. Yeah, I mean, it just depends on your users. For one thing, that 6.5 megs will get cached. So it's only going to be on the first hit that you take that 6.5 megs. that wouldn't be something I suggest where you have users on like a 3G connection, something like that. You know, if you have, say, a PWA or progressive web app, it probably isn't too bad either. It's just 6.5 megs is a lot for people in general to swallow. Server-side rendering, all the DOM. So I'm not sure. Yeah, only the delta. That's where I was going to head with that question. When you're using server-side rendering, it sends the initial HTML down the wire. It has a virtual DOM that's keeping track of changes, and just the diffs are sent in binary packets across the wire. We can actually view that if we do inspect. Is in network. I need to reload the page to get it. But if we go into network, I'll scroll this guy up. This underscore Blazor is the WebSocket connection, and frames is the transfers. And length, I think, is in bytes. So it's 27 bytes of data. If I delete an item, you'll see it shipped a couple diffs. So there's a few hundred bytes being sent back and forth. So it sent an update across, and it's saying go ahead and refresh that view. It's very efficient. So just a few bytes going across the wire. Notice it isn't binary, so you can't really inspect. Like, there's no JSON payload that's being sent across, so you can't really inspect what went across the wire because it isn't a binary format. But you can see that it is small and it is quick. So we saw the difference between server-side, we saw WebAssembly, we saw we can do some similar or exactly the same code. Here's where things get different, okay? On client side, on WebAssembly, if I want to connect out to remote data, right now this is local static data. I just have a list of orders that I newed up on init. When I do init, I just generate some data. This isn't a realistic scenario. If I go into fetch data, there's a little more realistic scenario here. This is the sample code that comes with a file new project. Oh shoot, I didn't mean to run the application. I'm gonna have to stop that. Again, there's no debugging, so it's just gonna sit there and eat up a bunch of CPU for no reason. So stop that from running. Let me do a Control F5 instead. Run without debugging. We'll take a look at what we got. So we have our app here. If I go to fetch data, this is what ships with the template. This is not a Kendo grid. This is just HTML tables. And if I go into my project, we can see that table being built up. And it's using get JSON async. So this is an HTTP request because we are in a client server scenario, right? No SignalR and all that fun stuff here. This is just using HTTP client RESTfully to get data from an API. We can look at our server part of the application, and we have a web API route called data, sample data, and that is where our endpoint hits the action weather forecasts. So if we look at that, let's actually convert this into a Telerik grid. So let's take this table out, and I can say Kendo grid data, and I'm going to set that to forecasts. And we'll go ahead and close that tag off. Let's see, I missed, oh, no, there it goes, IntelliSense caught up. Now I need to add a couple grid columns, so we'll go ahead and add those. I'm just going to use my little quick shortcut way of doing this again. Kendo grid column, we'll say field equals and we'll end those. There we go. So now we can start using our IntelliSense to help us out again. I can say name of And these are weather forecast items. Even though they're being serialized and deserialized, they're doing it in a way where we don't have to deal with it. But this is going across the wire. So we have name of, weather forecast, date, name of forecast, lost IntelliSense. I got to close that out. Summary, we'll put the summary in there. Just go ahead and copy and paste this guy down. And we also can use our temperature in Celsius and temperature in Fahrenheit. We'll go ahead and save that. That should replace that HTML table. So one thing that's nice about running without debugging is I can just come back and refresh. Go to fetch data. Oh, this isn't the WebAssembly one. This is the server-side one. Let's kill that and do a Control F5 once again. Make sure we boot up the right app. Can you connect to a database? Yes, that's where I'm headed with this next, Gorenhall. Going to show that if I'm on the client, the method of connecting the data, there's my weather forecast data, connected to the Kendo UI or Telerik Grid. The way I did that was with an HTTP request because I'm on the client side. So if I have a database and I'm building a Blazor WebAssembly application that runs on the client, and I want to get data from a database, I have to use get JSON async, and then I'm going to go out to a server, and I'm going to hit a web API endpoint, and in here I would have a DB context, just like I would have on Razor Pages or MVC, and I would send back a JSON serialized piece of data, and then my application would pick that up in this call to HTTP client. I would say get JSON async, whatever my data type is that I'm sending back across the wire. What's nice about the fact that I'm using C# both on the client and the server, though, is in this example where they're using weather forecasts, the server has the same data type as my client. So I have this shared folder. So you can see I have Telerik UI wasm.shared, and in there is my weather forecast object definition. So I have weather forecast, same weather forecast on the server and the client. Okay, so let's switch over. I'm getting there. You're just one step ahead. I know this is really cool stuff. I know you're anxious, so am I. What's cool is if I switch over to running everything on the server, I don't need a web API controller. I don't need to deserialize and serialize stuff. And I can do direct access to my DB context. So let's do that now. All right, so I'm going to actually close out the WebAssembly project now. I think everybody kind of saw I use HTTP request to fetch my data. And I point to a web API endpoint to get my data. That's pretty much what we're normally used to anyway. I'm going to go ahead and just close this project completely so I don't accidentally just jump back into it. And now I'm going to go back into the server-side project that I have. And in my server-side project, bear with me for a moment, I have to add some resources. I'm going to do add existing project, and I need to go out and find, I have a little boilerplate project, that's a mouthful, that is based off of the, what is this old school database called? Not Contoso. Is it Contoso? No. Oh shoot, the name is escaping me now. Let's see. I hope I see it in here. Northwind, thank you. That's what I was looking for. I've been working with this all week, and for some reason I couldn't remember. Northwind. So basically the project, yeah, there's too many of them. Thanks, Lohith. Northwind data access, I just pulled in. It was just a simple, what do you call it? Code first set of models for my database. So I have things like invoice, employees. It's just a setup to access that database. And I have this database on disk, so I just need to add a connection now. I need to reference this data access in my application. So under dependencies, I'll add reference, my Northwind data access project that I just added. So just basically boilerplate code that I use throughout multiple projects when I do demos. So that just got added. I need to set up a connection string. I'm not going to remember this off the top of my head, so give me a sec while I look at another project I'm using the same data access layer in. Let's see. I am using this on my tag helper demos that I do. So if I go into that folder, I should be able to find the setup for this. Underneath of startup. Yep, I need to grab my connection string here. So let's go over to our applications startup. Startup, and then let's see. I'm in the wrong one. I need to do this on my, let's see. That's a little bit different than my other app. This one is being server side. Let's try it here. Should be able to set that up here. I don't have configuration, so I need to pull in. I don't have configuration in this one. Let me switch over to another project. We already have this set up. There's a little bit more setup involved, I guess, than I thought there was. Let's go to start page. I have another one that's already templated out. Telerik Blazor WASM. Same concept though. All right. So in the solution, I have. Oh, this one doesn't have. Oh, sorry about this. I thought I had this set up already. That. I have another project in here. I just got to find it. Oh, I opened the wrong one. This is the Signal R version. That's right. So this one is the server-side application, and I've added I added the models directly to this one versus using my little template. And inside of pages, there we go. I'm binding to data in here. So let's go to employees and fetch data. All right. So here we go. This is very similar to the grid I had before. Let's see what we've got. In here, instead of using dependency injection to get to HTTP client, I'm using dependency injection to inject my Northwind context. So this is my DB context from Entity Framework. And down here, in place of that HTTP request, I'm doing an await Northwind context. I'm grabbing the products DB set and then calling toList async. So I have asynchronous connection to the database there. And this is directly on the server, so there's no across the wire. It's just directly connecting to the database through SQL. And then I have this this method called save changes. So let's see what that does. And we can run this. It's going to be very similar looking to the demo I had before. I think this one doesn't have a delete button in it. This one does something a little bit different. You may have seen this in the Telerik webinar. If you join the Telerik webinar, this is the project I used there. So if I go to fetch data, Now I have my grid, and in here I'm showing unit price, and I did some formatting and things like that. I have supplier ID and product name. Let's go to Chang, and I'm going to double click. This is a feature of the Telerik UI grid for Blazor. That opened up a field, and in here, let's see, I could say, I think, Goran, you were the one asking about, very anxious about seeing how DB context works. Now I've made the change, the UI is updated. If I hit Save Changes, I come back and refresh. Notice that change persisted, and that is because under Save Changes, I'm calling Northwind context save changes. That's it. That's all I had to do. I didn't have to map some input from the user to some DTO object and then map all the changes and reattach it to the database and then call save changes. I can just call save changes and be done. So that is really awesome. We could try, I haven't done this yet. Black magic, I know, right? No, what's black magic is this. So this is really cool. I didn't get to finish this in the Telerik webinar. I didn't have time. Notice I have this if statement wrapped around these two columns. I have these two here. I have this checkbox, and if I click the checkbox, those two columns go away. If I click show more, they pop up. So I'm actually just simply binding. I'm taking the checkbox. So this input says type is checkbox. It has some classes to make it look nice. And then I'm calling bind column visible. And when I bind this, I'm just binding this if statement as well. That's wrapped around the two columns. No need for state has changed. No, actually, that's actually a really great question. I'm glad you pointed that out. When you use the keyword bind in a parameter, that state has changed is automatically called for you. So that is the difference. Before, we had a button, and I actually want to add that button again. So let's add under product ID. Let's go ahead and add that button again. So it's going to be, let's see, open brackets. Actually, we need a template in here too. So template, close brackets. So boom, like that. I want to set up var item equals context as product. So I have my product. I want a button, kendo button, and then I want to call, I don't know if we've implemented bind on this. I'll have to check that one out later. I don't want to get down a rabbit hole. I want to do on button click and say, actually bind wouldn't be able to do it because we have to add custom code to it anyway. So let's do button click. I need a handler, so I'm going to say handle delete. I haven't created this yet, and I'll need to modify that a little bit too. I'm just trying to get it written. So that's basically what we had before. So in here now, I'm going to call void handle delete. So I have my delete, and I need to say product. Product as item. Or let's use product here. Let's say product. And now I can say Northwind context products dot is it delete in here or is it remove still? Remove product. So I can do that, and then I should be able to say Northwind context save changes, and that should do it. Now I just need to fix my button handler. I need to put in that little anonymous lambda function to go ahead and pass in the item to match my method signature. So actually this would be, I believe this would be called currying. If you want to look up functional programming terms, I believe that is actually a version of currying. We don't have any parameters we're matching, but it is kind of making parity with it. So let's see. So our handler's been set up. It's going to take that product, pass it to the DB context, remove it, hit save changes, and I believe that's all we need to do. Let's go ahead and refresh this page. Let's go ahead and I don't have. When you're running on the server side, I'm using debugging, so I can't just refresh and it's magically there. So I have to recompile and reload it. So let's go ahead and do that. And I should have a delete button now instead of the ID. And I will be very honest here and point out a little shortcoming of the grid. We don't currently have a way to change the column names yet. It'll probably end up being a parameter called title that will hang off of this side here. So you'll have field and you'll have title equals, and it'll be some string that you put in for the title. Currently don't have that yet. It's just very early on. I know I've been asked that question already. So let's go ahead and delete the 777 out. Delete. And then, oh, I'm getting an exception. Delete statement conflicts with a reference. Oh, there's a foreign key involved. So I would have to go ahead and delete order details as well. Okay. So that's just a, I don't have cascading deletes on that type of a product. So, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head how I might do this. I would have to go in. I don't know the database that well, so it'd be Northwind. Let's see, it said order details, I think. And I'd have to find by product ID. Let me look at the mapping for this. StateHasChanged would need to be called, but I think I threw that exception before I even got that far. Because it's going to run the delete handler, but yeah, I do need StateHasChanged at the end of it. So let's see, order details is where it said it was throwing the error. Yeah, product ID. So we'd have to fetch that and delete that as well. So we've got a foreign key constraint. So it's the database that's just not letting us do that delete directly. I would have to do a find here, I believe. Do find where the product ID, let's see, P, oh boy, this is escaping me. Let's do where. Where the product ID, actually that would be order ID, order details ID, right now product ID, but I don't like that variable name. It throws me off. It should be order details. I'm dropping half my desk on the floor, but I think if this doesn't work, you probably get the gist anyhow. We'd have to grab that item. We have to put that somewhere. We have to stash that value, and then we have to delete both of those items. And then we'd call save changes, and then we call StateHasChanged. If this was a flat database, wouldn't have to go through finding the foreign key and deleting it like that. But that should essentially do the trick. Is we're going to take that item, delete it. Unless It's been a little while since I've had to do this. Trying to think if there's another way to take that out. Update. Well, we can give this a shot. We'll say we can't remove directly here. Instead, we have to say, oh shoot, I can't remember off the top of my head how to do this. Point being, we delete the items that are attached through that foreign key, save the changes, and refresh the state of the object. Yeah, I can do an update instead. Let's do, well, we did an update. We did update through, unless you just wanted to see the button execute code. Let's see if we have, I think I might have another example. I don't know if, yeah, I think employees might have a foreign key as well. This example is pretty neat though. Go ahead and save this off. This is the employees tab here that was in the app. And I wanted to show that you can do images in the templates as well. So I'm doing some logic here and then calling out to a service to grab that image. So I'm grabbing the context. I don't have a field for gender, and the service I'm using requires a gender. So I just take the ID, divide it by 2, see if it's an even or odd number, and then kind of append whether it's going to be male or female image. So that's one advanced thing in templates. Let's take employee and see if I can delete an employee real quick. Since I think this database is a little more flat here. I just don't know the structure of the database well enough to just delete the other record. I'd have to look into, I'm sure there's sample code out there I could use. So let's see. We need another button column. Let's borrow a button from here. It's going to be very similar anyhow. Go to employees. And in place of this this image, let's go ahead and put that button there. And this is going to cast to employee instead of product. And I need to create my handle delete. So public, or actually just do void handle delete. See if I get a similar error if we were able to just delete an employee item. I think this one may be self-referencing, so we will see. It does have a hierarchy, but let's see if it'll figure it out on its own. I think there's also a mapping setting that you can tick in any framework that just allows it to automatically do cascading deletes, and that may be turned off in the mapping that I have. So let's do that, and we'll say Northwind context, Northwind context employees, remove item, and then we will do Northwind context save changes, and then state has changed, and that should do it there. Let's try this one. If this doesn't work, I will look into it further, and next week I will do another short demo just to show how it's done. This is just something I haven't tried yet, so those things tend to happen on a live stream. We got partially the way there, though. We did see how to implement a button, which is nice. Let's do advanced grid templates. There's our employees. Let's try to delete Nancy here. Oh, no, same thing. Inner exception, conflict reference, foreign key. These are tied to employee orders. So we would need to set that delete strategy up. Let's actually take a quick look at Northwind context. This is bugging me. On delete, set client null. So some of these do have delete strategies already. Foreign constraint. Let's see if I can implement one. So it'd be under has one employee. Has constraint. Where does this go? These are things you don't configure every day, but this is what I need. On delete, we're going to set something to null. So that one's a customer demo relationship. Let's see if we can get... that was on a different relationship altogether. Thank you. Yeah, we're continuing to work on it, and we hope to have more features coming down the pipe. Let's see, order detail, orders. Actually, let's jump over. Let's do this to order details. Order details has a delete strategy already in it. So let's change the demo. Instead of fetching from, let's see, this one was products. Let's swap this guy out. So let's do a order details instead. So we'll do this a little bit different. We'll take order details, and this shouldn't be too bad to rewrite. Order details. So we're going to do on init async, we're going to grab order details. We'll call that order. I don't know what this squiggly is for here. It's still running. That's probably what it's doing. So we'll take the order details, and then we're not binding to product anymore, so we'll change some of these out. Order details. Let's see what details we have. Unit price is still there. Unit price. Do order ID instead. Product name. Let's do units in stock. I'm just filling some of these here. We really don't need to have all of them. Unit price. I already did unit price. Let's try something else. Supplier. Let's do that one. And then order details. Quantity. We'll throw those in. And then handle delete is no longer a product. A couple more changes here. It's actually pretty easy to change out the type. And then now we have our context there. That last squiggle went away. This is on the fetch data example. Let's see if we can delete now. I want this delete to happen. Oh, something failed. I've got units in stock is not. Let's try discount instead. Doesn't like these fields here. We got discount. Order ID is already there. Product ID. And then well, order detail. Yeah, that should do it. Try that again. I'd like to see this work. I've never seen it happen before, so I forgot to put StateHasChanged in there too, I think, on this example. No, I left it in there. So we'll get the order details, we'll remove it, we'll save changes, see what happens when we come back. I think I need to do a little refresher on Entity Framework too. It's been a while since, oh my gosh, there's a lot of records there, and paging has gone bananas. Let's see if we can delete something though. Wow, that's interesting. I guess I should put a query in there. Oh, it's blowing up still. unexpected operation. Delete may have been modified since entries were last loaded. Optimistic concurrency exception. Yeah, there's a little more to deleting apparently than just doing those simple things. So I'll look at this. We'll revisit that again in a couple weeks. Next week, I will not be available for the show. There is a conference called NDC London. I don't know if you've heard of it. So NDC London is next week. And NDC London is going to be quite the event because Steve Sanderson, Daniel Roth, and Ryan Nowak are running a Blazor 2-day workshop. So I'm going to go crash that and say hello to those guys and visit their workshop and see what they're talking about in there. And I'm spending the week there in London at the event and doing the NDC London sessions. We have a booth. There's a Telerik booth. If you're out in that side of the world, come visit us and say hello. So that's where I'll be next Friday. So we won't have a show next Friday. So I will be out there, Lohith. I will be there all week. I get in Sunday and I'll be there until Saturday. So I get to spend the entire week in London, doing all the stuff here at the show, meeting lots of great people. So if you're out that way, folks, visit the show and stop by the Telerik booth, get that Blazor workshop in. But there will be no, I need to hop down to Amsterdam. Technorama Amsterdam seems to be a great show too, but it's always when I'm busy with something else, so I never get to go. It's pretty disappointing. So no show next week, unfortunately, though, because I will be out here. But I will ask lots of questions and learn a lot of things and bring that back to the show the following week. So the next show will actually be February 8th will be the next show. I believe it's February already. So February 8th will be the next show. Hopefully I'll have the delete problem fixed by then. So I can show some more additional demos. And we don't show Telerik stuff every single week here. So while I do love our components and what we're doing with them, they will probably be a smaller part of the show. I won't focus completely on the Telerik stuff every single show. But if there are questions out there about the products on future shows, I'm more than happy to answer those. And I'll showcase things as we build them, showcase community projects as I find them. Lots of great community stuff going on around Blazor right now. So I look forward to sharing like people's projects, like Lohith's project is really cool. The converter that I showed early at the top of the show. And again, I'll wrap all these up in show notes within the next few hours so everybody can go out and find those resources. Code samples, I'll try to share those today as well, whether they're on a gist or a GitHub. I'll try to get those up there. I'll also do replays of the show on YouTube, and you'll find them on Twitch for the next 2 weeks. They like to delete those after a couple weeks, but I will syndicate them on YouTube eventually, so you can find them there as well. So yeah, I'm glad you learned some new stuff. Thank you guys as well. When are they cutting down the download size? Incremental loading. That's what I need to ask next week. The recording, as soon as the stream ends, I believe the show will restart on Twitch under the videos tab. I don't know how long it takes to process those, but I don't think it's too long. As long as you're watching it on Twitch. YouTube is a manual process I have to do. I usually get those in about a week. Twitch keeps streams for 2 weeks, and I think they go up almost instantly, but after 2 weeks they completely delete them, so I archive them on YouTube. So again, no show next week. If you're looking for the show notes, they will be on my blog at edcharbonneau.com. I'll paste that into the chat room so you can find it. The show notes will be up there. I don't know exactly when yet. I have to run some errands. Again, I'm getting ready to go to London tomorrow, so I'm on a really short time frame after 2 o'clock here. So I'll try to get those up as soon as I can. It may be in an airport when I'm doing it, but I'll get them up, I promise. Thanks everybody for joining the show and participating in the chat room. Again, I want to make sure you guys have the Telerik bits if you want them. So it's PRG ESS. Let's see. I can't remember this URL. It gets me every time. Let's just get it up in the chat room. I know I have it bookmarked here. Yep, there it is. So the same one that's on the screen, but we'll paste it for easy clicking and getting those things. So there it is. If you guys have questions, post them in the Gitter chat room or hit me on my Twitter account at edcharbonneau, and we'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Thanks again for joining the show. Have a good weekend.